Hi there, welcome back. In today's video, we're going to be working on part 2 of the Whimsigoth Doll Room makeover. Now, in part 1, we focused mostly on the larger furniture pieces as well as the wallpaper and floor, which means that this time we're going to be focusing a bit more on sort of staging the space with decor items. So without further ado, let's head over to take a look at the doll room as it is now. This is the current state of the room. It's mostly as we left it at the end of the last video, except for this little side table that I just whipped up off camera from foam board. If you'd like a dedicated video showing you how I made this, just let me know down in the comments and I'll be happy to oblige. So the reason I really felt like I needed an extra surface in this room is because I want to add a lamp next to the armchair. Beyond that, I have plans for lots of framed wall art, plenty of little candles, lots of plants, mini books for these shelves, and lots of little whimsical kind of figurines. I feel like a really important part of the Whimsigoth look is intentional clutter, so that's going to be the goal when decorating this room. Now, what I really want to make for this room is a Tiffany style lamp. I shall insert some pictures of my references for this. I know that may seem very ambitious to try and emulate in miniature, but I think I have a pretty good plan. So I have several little pieces of recycled plastic packaging here. This one I know was definitely like the little cap you get on top of like a cornetto ice cream. This one I believe was the packaging from a mini fashion mini brands ball. And this I have no idea. It could be from anything. What they all have in common, though, is that they each have a clear kind of domed part to them, which I'm going to go ahead and cut out. Now, if you look at Tiffany lamps, they generally have a kind of black leading between the stained glass panes. So what I'm doing is using some acrylic paint that I haven't watered down at all, which means it'll retain some kind of body as I apply it. And I'm just going to paint on the leading. To be honest, I don't have any very specific plan for how I'm going to apply this, which would probably help matters. But I'm just going to apply wherever the mood kind of takes me in different shapes. And if it doesn't work out, I'll just have to wipe it off and try again. Here are the results of painting on that black leading. For the largest one, I went with kind of like a tulip pattern. Then for the middle one, I just followed the lines of the kind of ridging that was already in the plastic and then filled in the little segments. And then for the smallest one, I noticed that a lot of the reference images of Tiffany lamps I found online had a recurring dragonfly motif. So I tried to kind of replicate that here and then just surrounded them with some little swirly designs. I am pretty happy with how they all came out, which means that now I can move on to actually making the stained glass effect that I need for a Tiffany lamp. I have a couple of different ideas for how I'm going to do the stained glass effect. The first one is something I saw MyFroggyStuff do, and basically I think she said you just need like a water-soluble coloured pen, and I'm just sort of scribbling with it onto this scrap plastic I have, glob some school glue that dries clear onto the coloured patch you've made. Mix that up till we have our glue completely tinted blue. I'm going to use our largest lampshade as the tester because it has the most clearly visible segments, I think. And I'm just going to take some of this glue and paint it on one of the segments. I'm trying to do it quite thickly so that we get a decent amount of pigment. Also pushing it kind of into the black outline in case it sort of shrinks away from the edges as it dries. And then I'm just going to leave that to dry, and we'll see how that does a little bit later. For my other idea, I basically just figured that maybe if I used a non-water soluble pen like a Sharpie, I could just colour directly onto the plastic. I think I'm going to go in with the purple first and then just picking a segment and colouring it in. I will say I really do like the immediate reward of the colour kind of being laid down already. And I definitely feel like I've got a lot more control over where the colour and the pigment is sitting. I really like how this is looking at the moment. However, in order to make it a truly fair test, I am going to wait for the glue experiment to dry, and then we will come back and see which one is the winner. While I wait for that to dry, I'm going to work on the wall art. I received this bag of scrapbooking supplies for Christmas, and I'm basically just going to go through these and pick out anything that I think sort of fits the Whimsigoth aesthetic. I also have these cutouts I took from last year's calendar. They are all by Rendale Designs, which I really like, and some of these might work in a Whimsigoth room. As for framing, I have these two little guys that I bought from a craft store locally. They were 25 pence each. They are a little bit of a light-toned wood colour, so I might paint them a darker brown. And then I also have these little things, which I think were meant to be like for DIY holiday gift tags, but of course they are shaped like little windows. I haven't found a use for them as windows quite yet. However, I made this with one of the scrapbook designs, and I just cut out the center of one of these and then repainted it in brown and gold. And I do like how it turned out, but from the side it's just very obviously 2D. So if I do use this, I'll probably have to put it on a back wall rather than a side wall, but that's definitely an option. And then beyond that, I have lots of scrap cardboard that I can cut into frames, and I also have a little bundle of secondhand craft stuff coming from Vinted. I spotted it a few days ago. I think it was £3, and there is a little kind of ornate, I think it's gold frame that comes with that, so I will show you that whenever it arrives. But for now, I'm basically just gonna go ham and try and create as many little wall art pieces as I can from the supplies I just showed you. the final picture frame finally arrived from Vinted, and none of the scrapbook kind of images would fit comfortably inside it. So instead, I decided to go to the public domain free-to-use section on a museum website, and I just downloaded this cute little portrait of a girl and this cat, and I covered it in a coat of Mod Podge just to give it that like varnished look that a lot of classical paintings have. While I was on the museum website, I also found this painting, which I thought needed to go in the Whimsigoth room. It's got these lovely little fairies and the moon, and I just thought it was really pretty. So I swapped out the flowers that were in this frame for this one. And now I'm just using some sticky tack to hang them in the room. And now we have all of our tiny little pictures hung. Now that that's all done, I have returned to the Tiffany lamps to see how our little sample is doing, and it's not doing great. It definitely kind of migrated away from the edges, and the pigment is also not the best. I maybe used the wrong type of pens. That being said, I am going to go with the Sharpie method since, as you can see, it's a lot more pigmented and even. So I'm just going to peel off this little glue sample. And now we can start over with this, no harm done. I've got my Sharpies back again. And first of all, I'm just going to go ahead and carry on with this little guy, just to get him out of the way since we've already started. I will say that I'm not sure the colour scheme I chose for this one is super well suited to my room. It does read quite well as a Tiffany lamp. I'm just not sure if it's the right Tiffany lamp for a Whimsigoth space. So when I'm doing these ones, I'm going to try and be a bit more calculated with my colour scheme and colour placement. Now that all of our glass has been stained, it's time to figure out our next step. Now I want to make these lamps functional, so I have a couple of these little balloon lights. They turn on as you twist the base here, and as you can see, they work quite nicely to kind of show off that stained glass effect. However, I'm not quite sure how I'm going to situate them inside the shades just yet. Additionally, this shade in the middle here is going to be too small for these, so I'm not going to attempt to make this one functional. It's just going to kind of be decorative clutter. Since that basically makes this one the simplest to finish, I'm going to start here, and I was inspired by this image of a Tiffany lamp where the kind of stem comes up out of the top of the shade and arches down to the base. So for that, I have a piece of copper wire. I'm starting by cutting a little hole in the top of the shade. I've bent the wire into a nice sort of curved shape, and I've also used some needle nose pliers to just curl the end that I want the shade to sit on. I'm feeding the opposite end through the hole from underneath, and then it should sit nicely on top of that little loop to stop it sliding off. I'm going to bend the wire a little more just to get the shape that I want, and then cutting off the excess. And then I'm obviously going to need something for a base. For that, I have several sizes of buttons that I thought could work. I think this one is probably going to be the best size. And I'm just going to slide the wire through one of the holes already in the button. I'll just see if it'll stay on its own. It does, but it's not the best. So I think instead I'm going to add some glue just to secure it. Before I do that though, I'm actually going to remove the shade because I need to paint this black. I also painted the little button to match, and I can go ahead and feed the wire through the hole I made in the shade, and then glue the other end into the button base. While that glue is drying, I'm going to work on making this one functional. To put a hole in the top of this one, I actually melted it with the end of my glue gun, which made for a much cleaner hole. And then, obviously I have the little balloon light here. That just goes inside, and then the little loop on the top can pop out of the hole, and then I can just twist the light on underneath, and we have a functional lampshade. I need to paint the little loop on the top black so that it kind of blends in a little bit. With that done, the final thing to do will be to figure out how I'm going to construct the base of the lamp. I have some little wooden beads here that I thrifted, and I'm just going to pick out some nice shapes of those. And I'm just going to put this little wooden dowel in the middle to make it a bit easier to stack them, just so I can see how this is going to look. I also have another larger button that I can use as a base. And I think that with some paint, that could pay off quite nicely as a lampstand. So I'm going to use some wood glue to secure them into place. I let that dry overnight, and now we're back. It has dried slightly wonky, but I don't think it's super noticeable from a distance. Now what I'm going to do is just paint the whole thing black like I did with the wire before. This time though, I'm also going to dry brush on some silver paint. Now that it is all painted, I'm hoping that if I just add some sticky tack on the top here, I can just kind of affix the base of the bulb. I'm going to turn it on beforehand just to get the full effect. And I'll just press the bulb into the sticky tack, and it's on there. That actually worked way better than I was expecting. Now I can just pop him into the room, and I'm super pleased with how that looks. I actually want to see it with the main light off, and yeah, I think that's actually even better. I obviously also have the little non-functional lamp that I made, and I'm just going to pop him on the desk. I do find myself kind of wishing it was also functional after seeing how well the other one turned out. However, there isn't a huge amount I can do about that right now, and it works fine just as some extra kind of background clutter, so I'll just have to leave it as it is for now. So the next thing I really want to make for the room are those tiny books I mentioned earlier. For this, I just went to Pinterest and found as many kind of classic book covers as I could find that were double-sided, like flat images, put them all on an A4 document and printed them out. I actually have several sheets full, and I'm gonna go ahead and cut each of them out. Now that they are all cut out, I can just kind of identify where the spine of the book should be and fold the paper along there on both sides, and that gives me the shape of a book cover. I'm just going to go ahead and do the same for all of them. I may have gone a little bit overboard. These are all the tiny books I have. Some of the larger book covers are having trouble staying flat, and so my solution to that is to glue some little rectangles of scrap foam board inside the covers to represent the pages. I have a few options for the plants in the room, the first of which is these guys, which I made quite a long time ago now. This one was sculpted from polymer clay. I don't know exactly what plant I was going for, possibly some kind of bonsai. However, it is definitely still an option. These two, especially this one, were born out of a terrarium hyperfixation I had for a while, which I do think would fit in quite nicely with the Whimsigoth room. The little succulents you can see inside these two are actually made from painted hot glue, and I made them following a tutorial from either MyFroggyStuff or Poppy Seed Mini. I think they both made videos on how to make cacti / succulents with hot glue, so I'll try and link those videos in the description if I can find them. From following those tutorials, I actually have quite a lot of hot glue succulents and cacti, obviously, which did all turn out pretty well, but of course they don't have their own receptacles to go in, so they are still unfinished. I do have a few options for resolving that problem. These are all vases and pots that I either made or thrifted a little while ago as well. These two both came from a charity shop for 50p each. This is another of those little craft jars, but a bit smaller this time. And these I sculpted myself from polymer clay. I painted this one to look a bit like a Wedgwood vase. I really like that kind of cornflower blue and white look. Then I have this one, which I tried to make look like a little terracotta pot. And also this little thing, which kind of turned out more like a tea light holder than a plant pot. We may be able to make it work. These two are obviously going to be more suited for a big floor plant or a little tree. My solution to that is these things, which are, I think they're from a Christmas decoration again. I'm choosing this little vase just because I think the color scheme sort of demands it. And I have detached one of the little sticks from those fir tree type decorations. At the bottom, I pulled off the berries, but the little wires they were attached to are still connected, so I just bent them to kind of help the little tree stalk thing stand up. I'm just going to put it into the bottom of our little vase thing, and it kind of stands up, but not super reliably, so I am going to add some of the kinetic sand I have, which unfortunately, well, it's blue, which is not the most realistic for potting soil. However, in this one, I used kinetic sand that I actually just added some brown paint to, so I'm going to try and do that with this one as well. Luckily, it will be a lot less visible, so I only really need to colour the top layer of the sand / potting soil. And now for the top layer, I'm just going to mix up some more kinetic sand in this container, along with some very watered down acrylic paint, which should hopefully tint it brown rather than blue. Now that it is a more realistic colour, I can just add it on top of the blue. And now that I have some much more realistic looking potting soil, I'm just going to add back on the greenery to the top. And that is our first finished plant. However, I've got to be honest, I don't really like it. I don't know what it is. Maybe it's just very top heavy looking. So I think what I'm going to do is chop the stalk smaller, push it down into the sand, put the greenery in like that. I kind of like that better. For the next plant, I'm going to try and use my little blue Wedgwood-esque vase. And for this one, I'm just going to keep it simple and tuck these fake fabric leaves into the top, sort of arranging them until they look like a nice little plant thing. I'm going to ignore that that one slightly looks like lettuce and call it done for now. The next one is also pretty easy. I've got my little terracotta pot-esque thing, and I also have one of the little cacti that I made from hot glue a long time ago, and I can just squish him into the pot and he stays quite nicely. So that's the third plant finished. I also just found another hot glue plant that I had completely forgotten about. This one is not a succulent. I think it's meant to be like a ponytail palm, which I actually have myself, a human-sized one. Hopefully that was clear. And this actually fits really nicely into the top of one of the smaller glass craft jars. So I'm just going to put some more of the brown tinted kinetic sand into here. And now I can just tuck my little glue palm into the top and we have another plant. Now I can just figure out where they should go in the room. So as you probably saw at the end there, I decided to switch out the last kind of hot glue ponytail palm plant thing into this little kind of medieval looking jug that I thrifted from an Ever After High playset, and then I painted it to kind of look like pewter or something. And I've used it as kind of like a bookend so that I can break up the books themselves a little bit. I also have this little cat figurine that I also painted to look kind of similar. So he's also going to sit up on the bookshelf to serve the same purpose as the little plant on the bottom shelf. And with that, I can move on to adding all the other little ornaments that I've found for the room. I have this tiny little porcelain owl, and I thought he would look very cute right in the center of the mantelpiece. I also have this really, really tiny ceramic mouse. I think here by the terrarium would be a nice little mouse home. I also found another of my tiny mouse ornaments. I also have this little blown glass deer. I'm going to add it onto the bookshelf. I have this little resin owl as well, who I do think would fit the aesthetic. However, the problem is it kind of looks like a real owl. Does that make sense? Like, it looks like a 1/6 scale owl. If I put him in the room, is it just going to look like she has a pet owl? I'm not really sure what to do about him. So we're just going to leave him out for now and maybe circle back to him nearer the end. I do also have these little guys though, which were like included as the little friends of some plastic fairy figurines I have. I am really enjoying how realistically kind of full the room is looking now. However, this desk area is kind of bothering me. First of all, I don't think I like this lamp here. Additionally, the desk itself is just very light covered on top. So my solution to that is going to be adding this little square which came from, you know those leather, like, fabric samples you can get when you're getting a new sofa or something? I just cut up one of those and I'm going to add it onto the table with the magic of editing. And I think that breaks up the kind of expanse of lilac a bit better. So in order to make up for the missing lamp in that corner of the desk, I'm instead going to try and make like a little quill and inkwell to go back there. And this should be pretty easy. For the inkwell, I found these little beads, which I'm going to hot glue together. And then for my quill, I found this weird little hair clip. And I'm going to try and remove one of these purple feathers. And then just poke it into the top of our little bead creation here. And now we have a quill and inkwell. The final things I had on my list of clutter was potion bottles, crystals, and candles. For the candles, I have several of these, which are just rolled up strips of printer paper. My options for candlestick holders right now are these drawing pins. That one's broken. So these drawing pins. I'm basically just going to play around with pushing the candle tubes onto the pins. Oh, and it actually pushed up the inner part of the roll of paper and kind of made it look like a wick on its own. Yeah, I feel like from a distance that kind of works. Gonna try it again with another tall one. With that one the effect isn't quite as good, so I'm just going to cut off that central bit entirely and then put in a little piece of cotton thread, trim it to a decent length, and there's our little wick. I'm going to go ahead and repeat that with some of the others. And now that they all have wicks, I'm just arranging 3 of them on the little plate. And I think, judging by the space that's left in the room, this will probably be enough. Next, I have these little beads. And I'm just going to basically try and stack them up in various configurations to look like potion bottles. The final thing that any good witchy room needs is some crystals. For this, I have a marble, some little crystals of my own, this little stone from a bracelet that broke, and this packet of little gems. I'm just going to go through and pick some out that I think would look nice in the space. So now I can just go ahead and add in the last few things. I'm just going to add in a couple of little cutouts from those scrapbooking supplies I showed you earlier. And with that, I think the room is finally finished. And with that, our Whimsigoth living room is all finished. I am super pleased with how it came out in the end. It's so warm and cozy, and frankly, I would just like to spend some time in here myself. Thank you so much for watching, and please let me know down in the comments if you like how the room turned out, as well as any sort of aesthetics you would like to see me try and replicate in a miniature room in the future. If you did enjoy the video, I would very much appreciate a like and maybe even a subscribe if you'd like to see more. And I will see you next time. Bye!